Somewhere in the heart of Southeast Asia, something remarkable is taking shape. Work crews are on site around the clock, 7 days a week. Enormous steel columns rise out of ground that not long ago was flat, undeveloped industrial land. Concrete foundations spread across what used to be empty earth. Towering cranes sweep heavy loads through the thick, humid tropical air. And at the center of all this controlled intensity, a facility unlike anything this part of the world has ever hosted. This is not a routine manufacturing plant. This is not another factory added to a growing industrial zone. This is a $1.5 billion declaration. A bet placed with extraordinary confidence by one of China's most formidable battery companies. A bet that the future of global energy storage will not be determined in Washington boardrooms, in Brussels regulatory chambers, or in Tokyo corporate headquarters. It will be determined right here in Thailand. Welcome to Frontline Reports. I'm Nico. And today we are unpacking one of the most strategically loaded industrial moves of the past decade. A story that weaves together China's electric vehicle ambitions, the West's escalating tariff wars, Southeast Asia's rapid rise as an industrial power, and a global battery race that is quietly and fundamentally reorganizing the architecture of the world economy. Stay with us, because this story is considerably bigger than one factory. It is about who gets to control the energy systems of the future, and about who gets left behind in the process. To grasp why a $1.5 billion battery factory in Thailand is sending genuine shockwaves through global markets and government ministries on multiple continents, you first need to understand what batteries have become in the 21st century, and how radically that differs from what they used to be. For most of recorded human history, batteries were an afterthought, a convenience, something you picked up at a hardware store, dropped into a remote control or a torch, and forgot about entirely until it went flat. The humble battery sat somewhere near the bottom of the hierarchy of important industrial objects, useful, but not exactly the stuff of geopolitical strategy. That world no longer exists. Over the past 15 years, through a convergence of climate urgency, technological breakthrough, and massive government investment, batteries have undergone one of the most dramatic transformations in industrial history. They have evolved from a minor consumer product into the single most strategically important component in the global transition away from fossil fuels. Full stop. Every electric vehicle that rolls off an assembly line runs on a battery pack. Every solar energy installation that stores power for use after dark depends on a battery system. Every large-scale grid storage facility, the kind that keeps the lights on across an entire city when the wind stops blowing and the sun goes down, is built around massive arrays of battery cells. And as governments across the world accelerate their commitments to net zero carbon targets, the demand for these batteries has surged at a pace that is still, frankly, difficult for analysts to fully quantify. Consider the numbers. In 2020, the global lithium-ion battery market was valued at roughly $44 billion. By 2030, industry projections suggest that figure will surpass $290 billion. That is nearly a seven-fold increase within a single decade. Some forecasting models push the figure considerably higher still. We are talking about one of the fastest-growing industrial markets in human history. And right now, sitting at the absolute center of that exploding market, controlling the supply chains, the manufacturing capacity, the raw material processing infrastructure, and the fundamental technology, is China. According to data from the International Energy Agency, China currently produces more than 75% of the world's lithium-ion batteries. Chinese companies operate the largest battery gigafactories on the planet. They refine the majority of the world's lithium, cobalt, and manganese, the critical minerals without which modern batteries cannot be built. And they have spent the better part of 2 decades constructing an industrial ecosystem so deeply integrated, so efficiently scaled, and so cost-competitive that rivals in the United States, Europe, and Japan are still trying to figure out how to meaningfully close the gap. This dominance was not accidental. It did not emerge from some natural advantage or fortunate geography. It was the direct result of deliberate, long-term, patient industrial policy, of state subsidies deployed strategically over years, of capital invested in scaling before profit arrived, of a national willingness to operate at thin margins for extended periods in order to build manufacturing capacity that nobody else could match. China decided decades ago that batteries were the future, and it acted on that decision with extraordinary consistency and discipline. Now, that dominance is under direct and serious attack. The relationship between China's battery industry and the governments of the Western world began to fracture visibly around 2022. And with every year that has passed since, the fracture has deepened. The moment that changed everything, the genuine turning point, was the signing of the United States Inflation Reduction Act by President Biden in August 2022. This landmark piece of legislation did something that American industrial policy had not seriously attempted in a generation. It deployed direct government subsidies, generous tax credits, and strict domestic content requirements to try to rebuild American manufacturing capacity from the ground up, with clean energy technology at the center of that rebuilding effort. Under the IRA's framework, electric vehicles only qualify for federal consumer tax credits if a meaningful portion of their battery components and the critical minerals that go into those batteries come from the United States or from countries that hold free trade agreements with America. The law created, in effect, a powerful financial incentive for automakers and battery producers to source and manufacture within a defined circle of trusted partners, and a powerful financial disincentive for doing business with anyone outside that circle. The message to the automotive and battery industries was impossible to misread. If you want access to the American market on favorable terms, you need to build here or source from here. For Chinese battery companies, the impact was immediate and significant. Products manufactured in China with Chinese supply chains would not qualify for these credits. American consumers buying electric vehicles powered by Chinese batteries would receive no government support toward their purchase, and American automakers, who had been drawn to Chinese battery technology precisely because of its cost and performance advantages, suddenly found themselves caught in an increasingly uncomfortable position, wanting the economic benefits of Chinese supply chains, but facing mounting political and regulatory pressure to sever those very relationships. Then came the tariffs. In May 2024, the Biden administration announced a sweeping escalation of tariffs on Chinese imports, with electric vehicles and battery products taking some of the sharpest increases. Chinese-made electric vehicles entering the American market would now face a 100% tariff, effectively doubling their landed cost before a single dollar of profit was considered. Battery components faced increases that made Chinese supply chains dramatically more expensive for American manufacturers overnight. Europe followed its own trajectory. The European Union launched a formal anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles in late 2023, examining whether Beijing's substantial state support for its domestic industry constituted unfair competition under international trade rules. By mid-2024, provisional additional tariffs had been announced, some reaching as high as 48% on top of duties that already existed, targeting Chinese automakers seeking to sell into the European market. Japan and South Korea, meanwhile, intensified their own domestic battery investment programs, channeling billions of dollars into homegrown champions like Samsung SDI, LG Energy Solution, and Panasonic. The motivation was partly defensive, reducing dangerous over-reliance on Chinese supply chains, and partly competitive, a direct response to the pace of Chinese technological and manufacturing expansion. The collective message from the Western world was stated in clear terms: we are not going to surrender the battery economy without a serious fight. And China, as it turned out, had a move waiting. The company at the center of this story is CATL, Contemporary Amperex Technology Company Limited. If that name is unfamiliar to you, allow me a moment to convey just how significant this organization is in the context of the global economy. CATL is the largest battery manufacturer on the planet. That is not a regional claim or a qualified statement. It is a straightforward fact. In 2023, the company held approximately 37% of the entire global electric vehicle battery market. That is more than a third of every EV battery sold anywhere in the world, in the hands of a single company. Its client list reads like an attendance register at the world's most important automotive summit: Tesla, BMW, Volkswagen, Toyota, Stellantis, and dozens of other major manufacturers across multiple continents. Its founder, Robin Zeng, took a modest electronics components business in the 1990s and, over 3 decades, built it into a corporation worth hundreds of billions of dollars. One of the most remarkable industrial success stories of the modern era. And CATL does not stand alone. Behind it, the Chinese battery industry comprises a formidable constellation of additional competitors. BYD, which is simultaneously one of the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturers and one of its largest battery producers. Kalb, Goshen High-Tech, Svolt. Each of these companies is watching the Western tariff walls rise higher, and each is asking the same fundamental strategic question: how do we preserve our access to global markets when our home country is being systematically locked out of the most lucrative of those markets? The answer, increasingly arrived at through separate deliberations but remarkably similar conclusions, is geography. The logic is simple, but its implications are enormous. If you manufacture in China and try to export to the United States or Europe, you face tariffs that make your products uncompetitive or entirely unviable. But what if you don't manufacture in China? What if you construct your factory somewhere else? Somewhere with favorable trade agreements, reasonable production costs, a skilled workforce, and convenient access to global shipping routes. What if you build in Thailand? In early 2024, reports began to surface that CATL and its investment partners were in serious advanced discussions with the Thai government about establishing a major battery manufacturing facility in the country. By the later months of that year, those discussions had solidified into concrete plans, a committed investment of approximately $1.5 billion, with some analyses suggesting the final figure could climb higher, to construct what would become one of the most technologically advanced battery production facilities in Southeast Asia. The location selected was Thailand's Eastern Economic Corridor, a specially designated economic zone that the Thai government has been developing and promoting for years as a centerpiece of its ambition to attract high-technology manufacturing investment. The corridor already hosts significant automotive production capacity, including established plants operated by Toyota and Honda, alongside a growing cluster of Chinese automakers who have been methodically establishing their footprint in the Thai market. The factory, once fully operational, is expected to produce battery cells and modules serving both the electric vehicle market and large-scale stationary energy storage applications. It will create thousands of direct employment positions and thousands more indirectly through the supply chains and supporting industries that cluster around major manufacturing facilities. And it will be positioned, by virtue of its geography, its trade agreement access, and deliberate strategic design, to serve markets that would otherwise be effectively closed to products bearing a Chinese origin label. But why Thailand specifically? The answer requires understanding 4 distinct factors that, taken together, make the country uniquely attractive for exactly this kind of investment. First, Thailand's trade positioning. Thailand is a member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and benefits from the ASEAN Free Trade Area, which provides preferential trading terms with major economies across the broader region. Crucially, ASEAN holds free trade agreements with China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India. Goods manufactured in Thailand reach these markets with substantially lower tariff burdens than identical goods manufactured in China. The trade arithmetic works powerfully in Thailand's favor. Second, Thailand's automotive heritage. The country has been one of Asia's most significant automotive manufacturing hubs for decades, earning the informal but widely used designation of the Detroit of Asia among regional industry observers. Thailand produces approximately 2 million vehicles annually and has spent years building an ecosystem of parts suppliers, skilled engineering talent, logistics infrastructure, and automotive sector knowledge. For a company constructing a battery factory, this existing ecosystem is genuinely valuable, far more so than building in a location that lacks it. Third, Thai government strategy. Bangkok has explicitly identified electric vehicles and battery manufacturing as national economic priorities under its Thailand 4.0 development framework and subsequent EV promotion policies. The government has assembled a substantial package of incentives to attract high-value investment in these sectors: tax holidays of significant duration, reduced import duties on machinery and raw materials, streamlined regulatory approvals, and direct support for land allocation. This is not passive attraction, it is active courtship. Fourth, and this is the piece that makes geopolitical analysts pay very close attention: the origin question. Products manufactured in Thailand are, under most current international trade rules, Thai products, not Chinese ones. A battery cell produced at a CATL-owned factory on Thai soil is, for the purposes of most trade agreements and tariff regimes, a product of Thailand. And Thailand is not on any Western country's sanctions list. It is not subject to the punitive tariffs that have been imposed specifically on Chinese goods. This last point is where the story becomes both genuinely complicated and genuinely fascinating. There is a concept in international trade law called rules of origin. On its surface, it sounds like dry bureaucratic terminology, the kind of phrase that makes people's eyes glaze over at policy conferences. But right now, rules of origin is one of the most fiercely contested concepts in the entire global trading system, because it determines, at the most fundamental level, whether the kind of factory being built in Thailand actually succeeds in circumventing Western tariffs, or not. Rules of origin are the legal criteria used to determine the national identity of a product for trade purposes. Under most trade agreements, a product is considered to originate in a particular country if it has undergone what the law calls substantial transformation there, meaning that enough of its production, processing, and value addition occurred within that country's territory to justify assigning it that country's nationality for trade purposes. For batteries and electric vehicles, the specific thresholds and definitions vary by trade agreement and by the individual policies of the importing country. And it is in these details, in the thresholds and definitions and technical specifications, that the legal and political battle is being fought right now, with enormous economic consequences hanging in the balance. The United States Treasury Department and the Office of the United States Trade Representative have been wrestling directly with these questions as Chinese companies have begun establishing manufacturing operations across Southeast Asia. American trade officials have worked to tighten the applicable rules, attempting to ensure that what they characterize as tariff circumvention does not hollow out the entire purpose of the tariffs they have spent enormous political capital imposing. In early 2024, the Biden administration announced specific new rules targeting electric vehicle supply chains. Under these rules, EVs seeking to qualify for the IRA tax credit must not contain battery components sourced from what the regulations define as foreign entities of concern, a legal category that explicitly includes Chinese companies, regardless of where those components are physically produced. The rule was designed with deliberate precision to close exactly the kind of regulatory gap that manufacturing in Thailand might otherwise exploit. But this is where the complexity multiplies. These rules apply specifically to the American EV tax credit. They do not automatically apply to every market in the world. European regulations operate under a different framework. Asian markets have their own distinct trade architectures. And the emerging economies of Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America, regions where demand for affordable electric vehicles is growing rapidly as middle-class populations expand, operate under entirely different trade regimes that have nothing to do with IRA compliance requirements. A CATL battery manufactured in Thailand may not qualify an American consumer for an IRA tax credit, but it may be entirely eligible for preferential treatment under ASEAN trade agreements. It may face zero additional barriers when sold into markets across the Middle East, Africa, or South America. And in a world where the fastest-growing consumer markets are increasingly located outside the United States and Europe, those markets represent an enormous and expanding opportunity. As one international trade lawyer commented in a prominent business publication, the West is essentially playing whack-a-mole. Every time one regulatory gap gets closed, supply chains find alternative routing. Manufacturing geography shifts, corporate structures adapt. It is extraordinarily difficult to fully contain a company as large, as well-resourced, and as strategically sophisticated as CATL through tariff policy alone. For Thailand itself, the arrival of CATL and the broader wave of Chinese battery and EV manufacturers represents an opportunity that is simultaneously transformative and complicated. Understanding both dimensions is essential. On the opportunity side, the scale of investment flowing in is genuinely staggering. KTL's $1.5 billion commitment alone would be a landmark industrial investment by any measure, but it arrives alongside BYD's separate investment of hundreds of millions more in its own Thai electric vehicle assembly plant. Great Wall Motor, SAIC, and other Chinese automakers have all been expanding their Thai manufacturing footprints. Taken together, Chinese investment in Thailand's electric vehicle and battery sector has surged from a modest trickle to a substantial flood within just a few years. The Thai government has embraced this investment with visible enthusiasm. Senior officials and ministers have attended groundbreaking ceremonies. Investment promotion agencies have emphasized the job creation potential. Economic planners have articulated a vision of Thailand establishing itself as the premier electric vehicle manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia, a position that could define the country's industrial character and export profile for the next several decades. By some estimates, the combined EV and battery investment flowing into Thailand over the near term could generate more than 30,000 direct manufacturing jobs within 5 years, with multiplier effects supporting hundreds of thousands more in connected industries and services. But alongside the optimism, there are voices urging careful scrutiny. Some Thai economists and trade policy analysts have raised pointed questions about the nature of the industrial transfer involved. Is this investment genuinely building Thai industrial capability, developing local suppliers, transferring technology, training engineers, and creating the conditions for a self-sustaining domestic industry? Or is it primarily relocating Chinese manufacturing to Thai soil while keeping the most valuable elements of the value chain, research and development, proprietary component manufacturing, intellectual property ownership, firmly under Chinese corporate control? As one Bangkok-based economist articulated at a regional policy forum, there is a meaningful difference between a factory that assembles Chinese components on Thai territory and a factory that genuinely transfers technology and builds a local supplier ecosystem. Thailand needs to be certain it is getting the real thing, not simply serving as a flag of convenience for Chinese manufacturing capital. There are geopolitical sensitivities layered on top of the economic ones. Thailand has historically managed its international relationships with considerable diplomatic skill, maintaining strong and productive ties with the United States, China, and Japan simultaneously. Japanese automakers, particularly Toyota, Honda, and Isuzu, have dominated the Thai automotive market for decades, having invested heavily in manufacturing capacity built around internal combustion engine vehicles. The rapid influx of Chinese EV investment, now accelerating Thailand's shift toward electric mobility, directly threatens business models that Japanese companies have refined and perfected over many years. As a Thai automotive industry consultant noted, Japanese manufacturers are not going to surrender their position in Thailand without a serious competitive response. But they are starting this particular race from behind. The next few years in Thailand's automotive sector are going to be fascinating, and probably painful for some of the established players. Thailand is not an isolated case study. It is one highly visible node in a broader, deliberate, and remarkably well-coordinated Chinese industrial strategy that is being executed simultaneously across multiple continents. To understand the full scale of what is happening, you need to see the whole map. In Vietnam, Chinese battery manufacturers and solar panel producers have been establishing production facilities for years, drawn by competitive labor costs, favorable trade agreements covering access to both the American and European markets, and a government that has been actively welcoming foreign industrial investment. Vietnam's exports of electronics, solar components, and electric vehicle parts to the American market have grown substantially, often with a significant, though not all way,